It was a beautiful day in San Diego, March the 26th, 1997. High was about mid-60s that day. Clear skies, beautiful as always in California. But the weather wasn't going to be the talk of the town or the nation that day. You see, a call come into the San Diego Sheriff's Office, and officers were dispatched to a home in a local suburb. Now, this home is massive, but it didn't really stand out from any of the other homes in the area. This is a very rich part, had numerous massive homes in it. And while it looked very normal on the outside, what sheriff's deputies found on the inside was not normal at all. This home had been the headquarters, if you will, for a group called Heaven's Gate. Some of you may remember this when it happened. Inside that morning, sheriff's deputies found 39 members of that group who had taken their own lives willingly. And they had done so because they believed that living on earth was simply a test, and a comet was coming by that day, the Hale-Bopp comet, and they believed that an alien spaceship was hid behind the comet in the trail, and they thought the only way that they could ascend in the next level of being was to take their own lives, and they would catch a ride on the alien spaceship behind the comet. Now, I'm tempted to laugh, and maybe you're tempted to laugh as well, but it's not funny. Why? I mean, you look at that and you kind of shake your head. Why would somebody do that? It doesn't make any sense to us. Well, the Bible tells us why somebody would do something like this. Proverbs 14 and verse 12, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. I've always heard the old saying, people do what they do for a reason. People do what they do for a reason, and it's that reason this morning that I want to talk to you about. If I throw out the word authority, what do you think about? Maybe you think about a police officer or a judge or the President of the United States. Those are job titles, yes, that carry authority. But when I say authority, I'm not talking about a specific job. What I am saying is every person, every single person living on this earth has authority. You say, wait a minute, Doug. I don't have authority. I'm not rich. I'm not a boss at work. I'm not over anything. Well, maybe not. Me neither. But when I say you have authority, I'm not talking about authority to exercise over someone else. I'm talking about every human being on this earth has an authority that they have selected, that they have chosen to guide their life. You see, you think about it. Why do people do what they do? They have done that because they have made a choice to follow something. And this morning I want to talk about the right authority to choose for our lives. I want to talk about what it means to have the right versus the wrong authority. And I hope that these things can, as always, can help us to be better. So that being said, I know I kind of made a statement that's out there a little bit that our authority is our guide. And I want to back up just a minute. I want to back that up for you. You know what? That sounds like maybe a good saying, and maybe, Doug, that's your opinion, but I think Scripture bears this out. If you go to Joshua chapter 24, you know, Joshua he of course takes over for Moses. Moses leads people up to the edge of the Jordan River, and he gets to see into the promised land, but he does not get to go in. But Joshua has now, for several years, has led God's people. He has done his best to take this ragtag, complaining bunch of people and to go into the land, the promised land that God has given them to conquer, to do everything it is that God wanted them to do. And as we come to chapter 24, this is the end of Joshua's life, and it's really his farewell speech, if you will, his farewell admonition. Maybe a very familiar passage to you, but I want to start verse 14. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods of your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Maybe you have that last little bit on a sign at home. And you know, I guess I'm as guilty as this as anybody else. Sometimes I go to a verse of Scripture and I read it a few times and I think I understand what it means, right? I just kind of make an assumption and I just go on over that. Usually when I look at this, I think it's about making a choice between God and false gods. And obviously, I'm going to tell you that you should pick the one true God of heaven, naturally. But you see, Joshua here isn't just asking them to make an intellectual choice. He isn't asking them to just say, okay, in my mind, check A or B. You see, I think far too often I have missed this word, and I got to look, and it's everywhere. The word serve is all over this passage. You're going to serve what? God. Or you're going to serve these false idols. You see, Joshua is asking them, you need to pick an authority and then do what it says. Either you're going to pick God and his authority and you're going to do what's right, or you're going to do what's evil, but you can't ride the fence and do both. You have to pick one or the other. You see, what you select as your authority in your life guides you. It tells you what you can do, what you can't do. And for far too many people, they want to select the wrong authority in their life. Paul, as we already mentioned, there's only two possible options, right? Romans chapter 6 and verse 16. Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves to the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness? There's only two authorities. So many people want to find a loophole. So many people want to find an exception. So many people want to say, well, I did a little bit of this, but, you know, I want to be over here too. There is no middle. It's one or the other. How can you be in light and darkness at the same time? Have you ever seen the image where they hold up the candle in the dark lit room and there's shadows all over the room except what? Except where the flame is. Light doesn't have shadow. Light and darkness can't exist in the same place at the same time. You can't have two authorities, two masters, as Jesus would say. For you either love one or hate the other. It has to be one or the other. It's kind of like what Jesus said. Matthew chapter 7. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. And those who find it are few. Now I'm going to tell you that the question of what authority am I going to have in my life it's a pretty simple question. The problem for most people is not asking the question, what authority am I going to have in my life? The hardest problem for most people is getting them to the point where they'll even ask the question. You notice here how Jesus used the word easy. The broad way is easy. Why is the broad way easy? The broad way is easy because it doesn't require any questions. I don't have to examine myself. I don't have to try to hold myself to a higher standard. I don't have to do anything but what? What I want to do. The easy way is kind of like Burger King. Have it your way. Except you can't have it your way. It's just a false sense of security and self-independence. I just want to do what I want to do. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know, but I want to do it. You can select easy as an authority for your life. It's an option. It is a poor option. It will lead you in circles. It will lead you chasing your tail. It will lead you to rock bottom. And if it's carried out the rest of your life, it'll eventually lead you to hell. But there's another way. There's another authority. And it's harder. Now, we don't like to sell hard. We like to sell microwaves, not crock pots. But let's just be real. It's a crock pot situation. You ever notice here, verse 14, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard. Why did Jesus use the illustration of a gate? This big old wide, broad gate that everybody can go in, doesn't really, you can't miss it. But then what? You've got this narrow gate. What does a gate do? What? DB, what's a gate do? Well, I was hoping you was going to say keep the cows in. If you remember to close it, right? If you'll shut the gate will keep the cows in, right? A gate restricts access. Lord, I done started something over here. A gate keeps the things in that are supposed to be in and the things out that are supposed to be out. How do you open a gate? You got to have a key. If you don't have the key, you can't get in the gate. Somebody in this room right now, I guarantee you, has got a gate key on their key ring. You may have gate keys for gates you don't even have no more because you ain't thrown away keys in a long time. But you understand, you got to have a key. You got to have the authority to enter the gate. You got to be following the right authority to get in the gate. And that authority is a life led following God's authority. That's the only way. It's the narrow way. And it's difficult. It's hard. This is another one of these passages where I used to just assume I know what it meant. I used to think about the narrow way being off up somewhere high in the mountains away from everything else, and the broad way being down here out in the valley. But I think the narrow way is right through the middle of the Broadway. There's all the flashing lights, you know. It's kind of like Buc-ee's. They start putting signs up 150 miles where you get to one. Don't you want a Buc-ee's? Don't you got to use the bathroom? Don't you want to get off here? Wouldn't that be fun? The narrow way would not be hard if there were not temptations to come off of it. Every 6 inches. Sometimes more than that. Our authority is a choice. And it's a choice every day of our lives. You cannot unintentionally get to heaven. Nobody is gonna go through those gates one day and be like, "Whoa, how'd I get here?" It's not going to be accidental. The broad way is easy. God's way, it's harder in a way. Other ways, it's not so hard. Take my yoke upon you. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Right? It's about who are you going to follow. Authority is a choice. But now, if you're going to choose hard, if you're going to choose God's way, there's some things you need to understand. And the first thing you need to understand is that when you decide to select God as your authority and live your life differently than everybody else on that broad way, then your authority is going to be tested. They did it to Jesus. It shouldn't shock us, right? Matthew 21, in verse 23. And when he entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority do you do these things? And who gave you this authority?" Jesus answered them, I will also ask you one question. And if you tell me the answer, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Who gives you the right to go about healing people? Who gives you the right to go about doing good, to teach some new thing? And here's the thing, Jesus would have been glad to explain it to them if they had been seeking an honest answer. They weren't seeking an honest answer. They were trying to tear him down. They were trying to destroy him. They didn't want to know the truth. And you know what? When you decide, I'm going to live for God and I'm going to let God be my authority and I'm going to do things differently than the world does that, guess what they're going to do to you? They're going to do the same thing. It shouldn't shock us. It shouldn't surprise us. But I'm going to tell you that when you're in the throes of it, it's still going to hurt. You look at what Jesus said in John 15, beginning verse 18. If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. You think about that. If the world hates you because you're trying to follow me, remember, it hated me too. He knows what it's like. He knows what it feels like. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of this world, aka you don't have its authority, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they would keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. When you start bucking the trend, when you start going a different way than everybody else does, get ready. Some point, some way, you're going to be challenged. Now, you're probably not going to wind up nailed to a cross. Probably not going to have to give your life, but somebody somewhere is going to challenge you. I think about 1 Peter 3:15. Be ready to give an answer for the hope that is within you. Right? You got to be ready to answer those questions. Because maybe the one person that rises up and challenges your authority is the one person who actually you may turn to Jesus himself. Maybe the person asking you and challenging your authority is really in the back of their mind doubting their own. Who are you to do this good thing? Who are you to live better than, you think you're better than we do, don't you? You all high and mighty. I know who you are. I know what you used to do. I know what your past holds. Now you're all holier than thou. What they're really asking you is how did you make a change? How are you not the same person you used to be? And the answer to that is Jesus. The answer to that's Jesus. It's hard when you're the one getting the dark slobbed at you. It's scary. Your heart pounds. You hear it in your ears. But you got to be ready for it. Now, the other thing you got to understand, your authority is going to be tested, but you also understand that authority leads us, and it may very well lead you to some uncomfortable places. Think about what Jesus said. This is the beginning of the Great Commission. Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. I mean, that sounds cool, doesn't it? Wouldn't you like to have all authority? I mean, the old saying, it's good to be king. But just because he had all authority didn't mean Jesus got to willy-nilly go around and do just exactly what he wanted to. You look at what he said in John 6. All the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never cast out. For I have not come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all that he has given me, but raise it up on the last day. And this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. Jesus had all authority, and yet he was still guided by the will of the Father. And you think about what that authority allowed him to do. It allowed him to heal the blind and heal the lame. It allowed him to touch the leper It allowed him to feed the multitude. It allowed him to invest in 12 knuckleheads we call apostles, so that they could turn around and invest into the rest of mankind. It allowed him to do all these wondrous things up into and including the point of his death. His authority led him before the shears like a lamb is silent. You think about Matthew 26. You may have noticed this morning we've not done the Lord's Supper yet. There's a reason for that. Matthew 26 and verse 26, now as they were eating, Jesus took bread. This is after the Passover feast. And after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. And took the cup, and when he given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink it again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. Jesus, having all authority, led him all the way and up into the cross. It also led him out of that grave. But you got to understand that when you follow God and his authority, I don't know where it's going to take you, but it's going to take you places you never imagined. It's going to take you places sometimes that are uncomfortable. It's going to take you down in the bottom of that valley. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, what I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, what? They comfort me. It's going to lead you some places. You look at one more, 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 16. And here's where it kind of gets to us. We look at Jesus and what he did with his example of his authority. But really, what does it mean for us? This is the cup of blessing that we bless. Is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Now, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm about to say, because I don't mean anything bad by this. I want every Christian in this room this morning to partake of the Lord's Supper. But I want to ask you, should you partake if you're not willing to participate? If Jesus exercised his authority and it led him to the cross to shed his blood for me, should I not be willing to do my little, feeble, minute part to participate in what he did? Peter talks about we're being built up as a spiritual house on Christ, who is the cornerstone. My brick is worthless in that house if I'm not willing to participate. You see, authority leads us, but as we wrap up this morning, I want to save the best for last. 1 Corinthians 15 tells us something about Jesus and his authority, right? We read in Matthew a minute ago that all authority has been given me in heaven and on earth. But look at 1 Corinthians 15. Then comes the end when he delivers the kingdom to God the Father after destroying every rule and every authority and power. For he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. For God has put all things in subjection under his feet. So, verse 27, when you see God, it's talking about the Father. The Father's put all things in subjection under Jesus' feet. But when it says all things are put in subjection, it is plain that he, the Father, is accepted who put all things in subjection under him. Jesus had all authority in heaven and on earth. He didn't have it over the Father, right? But look at verse 28. When all things are subjected to him, Jesus, then the Son himself will also be subjected to him who put all things in subjection under him, that God may be all in all. Now, Paul, bless his heart. Let me translate for you. All authority is given him in heaven and earth, but when the end comes, when Jesus has defeated every enemy, including the last enemy, death, then he's going to take his bride, he's going to gather them together, and he's going to go home, and he's going to turn his authority back over to the Father. He's not going to need it anymore, because him and his bride are going to get to go home and be with the Father. You understand that the authority not only leads us, it's trying to lead us home. It's trying to lead you home. And yet so many people want to push back against that. I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do this, and I don't. Why? God is like that father in Luke 15. His wore a circle plumb out in the yard, waiting and longing for you to come back. That's who your Father is. And He has given you His authority. He's given you His will. He's written it down for you so that it could lead you home. I don't know what you're going through this morning. I don't know how you're struggling. Maybe you need to become a Christian. Maybe you're having trouble staying one today. I don't know. But I know that you have a God that loves you. I know that you're surrounded by people, God's people that love you. And if we can help you in any way, would you come while we have this invitation? So.